Here's my full interview with Stoo Cambridge, recorded for my developer spotlight video on Sensible Software. This was recorded in March this year. If you haven't watched that Sensible Software video, I recommend doing so first, and you can find the link to that below. You can keep up to date on what Stoo's up to on Twitter @DesignDroid and Instagram @TheDesignDroid, or on his website thedesignDroid.co.uk, where you can buy his fantastic pixel art prints, all of which are linked in the description. I have one of his Amiga Canon Fodder canvases on my wall here in the game room, and I can't recommend them enough. Thanks again to Stoo for talking to us about his time at Sensible Software. I've cut out some of the pleasantries at the start, so we'll jump right into the questions. Hope you enjoy the interview. I mean, going right back to the start really first. How did your kind of interest in gaming as a kid and computers prior to working in the industry actually start?
Well, I think it was around 1980, 81, you know, when the original 8-bit machines were starting to make an appearance in the high street. And at that time, there was nothing like it. So for me, seeing all this new technology was like, what is this stuff? You know, and so I started, like many people in my generation, you'd start seeing all these sort of adverts appearing and a few in the TV. Then you get the Argos book selling things. And I wanted a VIC-20, and I hadn't really looked into it in a big way because it's still very much a hobbyist thing. You know, a lot of people were still making their own machines, and I mean the ZX81 come out, and that was in kit form when that came out, so you had to make it yourself. So it wasn't really until sort of the VIC-20 come out that I thought, well, I'd like one for like Christmas. I think I got it for Christmas. So I sort of asked my parents, and my dad said, well, yeah, we'll put it on your list and see what Santa brings. So I got a VIC-20, and I absolutely loved it. And I got 2 games with it. I got a few games. I got games that came bundled with, like Blitz, which is, I don't know if you ever see Blitz, where you hit the space bar and it drops the bomb. That was on there. And I'd got 2 games that I picked up when afterwards. And I got Abductor by Jeff Minter and Laser Zone by Jeff Minter. And I didn't get an expansion pack, so I couldn't play Laser Zone because I think it needed an 8K expansion pack. So I had this thing here, and I'm thinking, I really want to play this, but I can't. But I played Abductor until, like, you know, I was really, really good at it, and I was just blown away by the sound that he got out of it. And I think he's responsible partly for my interest in being a video game developer, because I looked at what he was doing and I started following him from there on. And went to a few computer shows, and he was there, and I used to get chatting to him, like many people who do love his work did. And I just sort of thought to myself, right, yeah, I really want to do this. And that's literally where it all started. And I always wanted a Commodore 64, but my dad had said at the time, we'll see how you get on, you know, and if you see that you're really into this, then we'll think about getting you a Commodore 64 next year or something. So, but that's pretty much how it started for me.
So at some point you started creating your own games. Is that right?
I had a little. I dabbled on the 64 when I got a Commodore 128. I think about a year or so later, the 128 had come out, and I started learning assembly language on that, and I never really wrote a game on it. I did lots of little routines, little demos and things like sprites and scrolling and that, and I never really got that good where I could put it all together and make a game. But I did one game on the 64 called Battle Ball, which was a shoot 'em up construction kit game. And this is around the time when the Amiga had just been sort of announced. It was like coming out, and all the press was saying, like, you know, there's this new amazing machine coming out. And so I thought, I really want one of them. And I'd had this game that I'd sort of put together, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to try and sell this. It's a bit cheeky because, I mean, shoot 'em up construction kit games, they all look pretty much the same, don't they? I mean, I know the ones you can see today have been hacked quite a lot. And I thought, well, I know what I'll do. I'll hack the front end a little bit, and I'll see if I can see if I can sort of sell it to somebody, like somebody, you know, someone's gullible, but give me some money for it. And they did. Most of them said no. Most of the budget has said no. Like Mastertronic said no, and Codemaster said no, definitely not. This is a shoot 'em up construction kit game. What are you talking about? And then the Powerhouse Publishing, who I think were I can't remember who their parent company was. They were pretty known for some really ropey budget titles. And they said, yeah, all right, we'll have it. And I was like over the moon because I thought, hang on a minute, this is a shoot 'em up construction kit game. And they said, no, that's fine. We'll sell. I mean, they'd sell any old rubbish, I think, in the end. and they gave me a check. And they said, I was really excited, I mean, this is 1987. And I'm like, wow, this is like amazing. So, so I got the check, banked it really, really quickly, which turned out to be a good thing because they went under not long after. But they went under just before they'd done all the box art and the production. And I thought, if only they'd have gone under after they'd, released it, then at least I'd have had the physical copy in my hand. That was the only game I've actually had published on my own, But that allowed me to then save up and get an Amiga 1000 when it came out. And that was the start of my proper sort of foray into video game development.
So you were obviously, if you were using the shoot 'em up construction kit, you were a Sensible Software fan already, were you?
Oh yeah. I mean, when I got the 128, I mean, my friends had 64s, and I desperately wanted a 64. And of course, when they announced the Commodore 128, I thought, well, I'll have that. And luckily enough, I got it. My parents bought it for me. But I'd been a big fan of like Sensible's games just by playing on my friends' computers, like Parallax and like even Galaxy Birds and things like that, and Insects in Space, and then Whizball. And I remember playing Whizball, and I actually played it for the whole weekend. And because you had no save states or anything back then, you couldn't save the game. So if you wanted to complete a game, you had to leave the machine running. And I remember telling my mum, and I've said this before, and I mentioned to my mum, I said, don't go in my room, don't vacuum, don't clean, don't do it, just leave it this weekend because I've got something on my machine that because I thought if she goes in there and she'd she's cleaning the keyboard or something and she knocks the power cable, anything, I'm thinking, oh no. And I actually completed the game.
Nice.
I completed the whole weekend it took me to complete Whizball. And I was well pleased with myself, But yeah, I was a huge fan. I was a huge fan of Sensible.
So how did this? So you got your Amiga. So how did this interest lead to you actually working in the industry or working at Sensible Software?
Right. Well, I had a friend of mine who he'd actually had a couple of games released on the 64, and he'd had a game called Armadillo, which was by Codemasters. I think they published it. And I was around his house, and I'd got my Amiga, and I'd done sort of, I'd started using D-Paint, which was phenomenal at the time. I couldn't believe how cool this software was. So I really started to get into doing pixel art. Well, it wasn't known anything else because it was just art, video game art. There wasn't such thing as pixel art back then. It was just that's all it was. And I bought up a little portfolio. I just had a few portfolio items which I'd just been knocking about with. And I took him around and he saw them. He said, oh, this is really good. And he'd got a deal. He'd had an Amiga. He'd bought an Amiga 1000 before I'd got mine, and he'd got a publishing deal for a game called The Crystal. And I think he did Obitus as well. But he said, I know somebody's looking for an artist. So I said, he said, well, give us a disc and I'll give it to him and I'll see if they want to use you for anything. And that's pretty much how I started. And that company was Impressions. Who did, they did quite a few different games like Rorke's Drift, and they did like Web of Terror, which was awful, Final Conflict. They did loads of games. But the first game I worked on was a game called Renaissance 1, which was a pack of 4 arcade-style games. And it was like Space Invaders, Centipede, Galaxians, and Asteroids. And it was literally just 2 versions. You did like a contemporary version, which meant I could do what I like, and then they had like a classic version, which was like homage to the original arcade graphics. And that's pretty much my first published title on the Amiga, and I did a few titles with them, built up quite a good portfolio of work. And then one day I was just looking through I think there was a bi-weekly magazine that came out. It was like one of those sort of newspaper ones, like Micromart. And just in the back of these magazines, they'd often have job adverts, which for game developers and publishers. And I just saw this advert from Sensible Software, and I was like, oh, that's it. And they were looking for artists and programmers. And I'm thinking, oh, shall I apply? And I ummed and ahed about it. I thought, oh, maybe I'm not good enough. I don't know. And I thought, well, I've got nothing to lose. And I was only about, must have been 19 at the time, 20, 19. And I thought, well, I'll just send it off. And if they say no, they say no. At least I've not lost anything really other than a disc. So I sent it off, and I didn't expect to hear anything. And then lo and behold, like a week or so, 2 weeks later, I got a letter back saying, we'd like to invite you in for an interview. And I was like, wow, you know. So I didn't have a car. I mean, I'd passed my test, but I didn't have a car. So my dad took me up there, which is in Cambridgeshire, a place called March, and they had an office right next to the station. So every time a train went past, the building was a little bit like that. So, and I went for this interview, and they said, right, well, you know, that was it. And I think what happened after I went back, and they said, you've got the job. You know, long after, but they'd show me the list. They had like a list of names, which I've got somewhere, and they had like about 10 people on this list. And what they'd done, they'd gone through the portfolios and they just like scored it. So they'd scored the list, who's, you know, for what different features and originality, etc. And it's between me and one other guy. And I don't know why they picked me, but you know, what edged it for them with my work. But I was fortunate enough to get the job, you know, and that was it really. And that was my way into like the a much sort of a larger scale of the industry, you know, with more recognition.
Mm.
And then I was part of Sensible. But the only thing I was really gutted about was Martin Galway had left the company about 3 or 4 months before I joined, and I was so gutted because you know, big fan of his work on the 64. I thought, oh, that's really bad timing, you know. But other than that, it was fantastic getting that job.
So when you came in, what kind of, if you look at the, you know, the release list, whereabouts were they at the time?
I came in. Do you remember Mega-lo-Mania on the Amiga?
Yeah, it's one of my favorites.
Yeah. I came in as I was finishing writing it. So I went up to the offices, and I think I went for I think it was the second interview or the second time I went up there, and Chris Chapman was working on Mega-lo-Mania. And of course, I'm like a young fan of Sensible, and I was like, "This is amazing." I mean, this is like I always draw the analogy of, like, you know, you're a big fan of someone like Pink Floyd or Led Zepp or Van Halen or somebody or Iron Maiden, and you're going into the studio to watch them work, and you're just like this fan, and all of a sudden they give you a job, and you're like, "This isn't real. This is this," you know, because for my age group at that time, they were like rock stars to me. It was like, this is amazing. So he was working on Mega-lo-Mania, finishing it off. And I'd bought an Amiga 1500, which was that rebadged 2000 that Commodore UK had released. And I was using that for most of my work. And I was just talking to Chris about it. And I said, yeah, he said, what Amiga do you use? And I said, I've got one of those Amiga 1500s that had just come out. He said, oh, they've got a different configuration of chip RAM than fast RAM than the normal Amigas. And I said, all right. He said, would you mind testing the game out on your Amiga? And I'm like, yeah, of course I will. I don't mind, you know. So he gave me, I can't remember if he sent it through the post or he gave me a copy there. I honestly can't remember. But he gave me a copy of the game that before it had come out, just to test, you know, to see whether it would work all right. And I was like, wow, you know, and that was it really. And I was in the Sensi Club. So during that time, there was only like John Hare, Chris Yates, and Chris Chapman, who were like working in the office. And that was me. And then obviously Jules started with me. We started at the same time, and that was it really. We was in.
So John would have done the art, would he, on Mega-lo-Mania?
Yeah, he did. I think there was they had another artist to do all the title screens and the loading screens, but John done all the graphics in game. So, and that was obviously before Sensi Soccer came out. So those little tiny characters I think that was like the beginning of it. Of that look.
So was that then a conscious decision to stick with that style going forward?
I think from what I remember at the time, and for hearing what John said since, it was really down to design of the game. So to get more information on the screen, you know, I mean, I think what's the resolution? 320 by 256 or something, the Amiga. Which is fine back then, but when you've got lots of information, lots of sprites, the only way to do it is to scale them right down, so you've got a representation of a little man rather than actually a nice cartoon version of him. And I think that is purely the reason why that look kind of evolved and became the Sensi look. You know, it literally was that. You know.
So while we're on the topic of Mega-lo-Mania, did you work on like porting Mega-lo-Mania to anything like the Mega Drive? Or?
Yeah, I did. I was a big fan of consoles. I still am a big fan of consoles today. And I'd bought a Japanese Mega Drive on import. And it's funny, where I lived in, I used to live in a place called Goodmays in Ilford in Essex, which is East London. And it was funny, there was a guy who was importing machines, who lived like literally about a 15-minute walk from my house. And he advertised in a lot of the press, and I didn't realise he was that local. So I'd buy a lot of my import games from him, and he'd have loads of stuff. He was importing loads of stuff, so I was a huge fan. So when John and Chris said that they're going to do Mega-lo-Mania in house, porting it to the Mega Drive, he said, would you be interested in working? I said, yeah, definitely, because this was like a time before anything was out about what these machines could do, because I mean, think now, if you look online, you can find information on all the games consoles, you can find out what chips they had them, all the hardware, the programming, you can get everything. Well, back then, all that information was pretty much kept under wraps. The only way you'd get access to the information is to know a developer who was working on it. And even then, a lot of them were quite secretive because you had to sign NDAs to say you can't talk about this stuff. So for me, being able to work on something like a Mega Drive was just like, yeah, definitely. And I loved it. I absolutely loved working on a machine. And I converted all the whole lot, all the graphics to the Mega Drive. And Jules, he worked on the conversion with me. And between us, we kind of, sort of worked out the best way to get an Amiga game running on a Mega Drive. And I mean, there's a few things we did, like for instance, the intro sequence, because the original loading screens were 32 color. Well, the Mega Drive can only do 16 colors on a tile at a time. So what we did, we overlaid 2 playfields, and I split the palette into 2 sets of 16 banks. You had like palette 1 and palette 2, which is like, and then you combine them like that, and then you get your full 32 colors. So, which is a really, really good way of doing it. But also the screen had to be scaled down. All the graphics had to be scaled down on the intro because the Mega Drive just didn't have enough memory to hold it all in. So yeah, but I really, really enjoyed working on the Mega Drive, and I just wish we'd done more. I'd love to have done more Mega Drive games. Really would. Yeah, it's a great machine.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, in terms of the actual gameplay on the Mega Drive version, it's, you wouldn't know that it was any less capable or anything really.
Yeah, I mean, the great thing about the Mega Drive is, certainly coming from an Amiga, is they've got the same processor, the 68,000. So the code is identical. I mean, literally, the gameplay code is identical to the Amiga version. And the same with Sensi Soccer. The Sensi Soccer code running on the Mega Drive is exactly the same code that runs on the Amiga. It's just all the graphics stuff is different because it's got totally different hardware for doing graphics. I mean, the Amiga's got bitmap graphics, and Mega Drive has got sprites and playfields using tiles. So they're totally different worlds apart in terms of the way they're producing it. But it certainly made conversions a lot easier. So you could concentrate on getting it to run in a way that is solely representative of the original. And I used to get frustrated when I'd see conversions by other people, not just of our games. I mean, because we did a couple in-house, but you'd see a conversion of a game on the Mega Drive and you think, well, how can they mess this up? Because it's from an Amiga or it's from an ST. And you think, well, how could they mess this up? Because half the work is there. The code, the gameplay code is already there, But, I think the thing with the industry is that it was all sorts. You had some really good quality programmers, but also on the other way, you had some people who weren't maybe quite as on the ball as they should have been. But overall, I think it was a great machine to work on. A great machine.
Yeah, I always find that with Bullfrog's Syndicate, which I love on the Amiga, but the console versions, there's some shocking console ports.
Yeah. It's frustrating because, I mean, the biggest issue with porting from, say, an Amiga to a Mega Drive is memory. Because I think the Mega Drive only had like 64K of RAM or something, or VRAM or something. It had a really, so you had to, from what I know, you had to bring the data in from the cartridge, and it was quite a clever memory management you had to work out. I might be mistaken. There's probably Mega Drive programmers listening to thinking, "What are you talking about, Stu? You have no idea what you're talking about." But I'm sure there was something like that on it from what I recall. But the thing is, part of game development is getting over that challenge. It's the challenge of that first moment where you're learning assembly language back in the 8-bit days. How do I get a sprite on the screen? And then that moment you see that sprite, you think, right, how can I move it? And then when you move it, right, let's have a scrolling background. It's those challenges and overcoming those challenges, rather than saying, well, I can't do that, so therefore I'll just bodge it and hope for the best. And I think that's what made a lot of good developers that's what made them good, because they would push the boundaries a bit and say, well, that's challenging, but that doesn't mean we can't do it. We'll have a go. And I think that played an important part in certainly doing conversion work, to give it the best, the best you can, because people know the original version, they know the Amiga version or the ST version. So if people want to play that on their console, then you should try and deliver the same experience.
So you presumably, when you work on Amiga stuff, you're using stuff like D-Paint and you're using Amiga. Is it the similar software and hardware if you were doing something for the Mega Drive, or?
It's funny because I've just written an article for Amiga Addict magazine about just discussing that, because the thing with the Amiga is the original chipset, the OCS chipset, you could have like 16 colors, 32 colors in the low res mode. So working on a Mega Drive, you could do it, but you couldn't see all colors, because the Mega Drive had 4 palettes in use at once. So you had like 64 colors effectively. Obviously minus the 0 color, because that's black or transparent. But when you got to the AGA chipset, I used the Amiga for that, I did use a PC on some of it later on, but you could use an Amiga for doing all your console graphics. So you could do SNES graphics on it, because it had the AGA chipset obviously had a 256 color mode, which is brilliant for doing that sort of thing on the SNES. So yeah, I much prefer to do my work on an Amiga. I did dabble on the PC. I had D-Paint on the PC and I hated it. I really, really didn't like it. And I think it's because of the chunky pixels. When you look at the VGA display back then, it was so chunky. You look at, even the graphics were lovely. I remember all the early adventure games that were coming out with these beautiful graphics. But I always think to myself, they would look so much better on a CRT with a nice proper like an Amiga monitor rather than a PC monitor, because they were just too chunky. So for me, I always maintained that I would try and work on the Amiga for all of my work if I could, and I did do that all the way through.
So what was your first proper project after joining Sensible Software?
Well, the first thing I did is I did a and this was literally the first day I'd started. I did a cover disc demo called Sim Brick. Oh. I don't know if you've made.
Yes, so you drop them on the amps.
Yeah. And because I was young and I wanted to make a really, really good impression, I thought, I know what I'll do is I'll impress them, and I'll work through the night to get this done. Didn't need to. There was no reason for me to do it. But I thought, and they left me in the office on my own all night to do it. They said, because they were so. I was thinking to myself, if I could have been anybody, I could have nicked after stuff. I could have done a runner, anything really. But they left me there all night, and I said, I'll stay a bit late and I'll get this screen done. And I'm doing all the graphics for it, and it wasn't a lot of work really. But I wanted to make it the best I could, so I stayed all night. And so that was I suppose officially that was the first piece of work I did for Sensible. But the games project was Cannon Fodder, was the first one I'd started working on. But then halfway through that, we stopped and we did the Mega-lo-Mania conversion to the Mega Drive. So we kind of and then I went back to the Cannon Fodder afterwards. So and then subsequently I then worked on Sensible World of Soccer. So a lot of people mistake me for doing the graphics for Sensi Soccer, and I never did. I never did any of the graphics for Sensi Soccer. The only thing that appeared in the original Sensi Soccer of mine was the little loading Sensible logo, which is like the 16 color one, which is about like that size. That's the only thing I did, because John was working on a logo, and I'd done one for Cannon Fodder, and I said, well, you can use mine. And he said, oh, I'll have that. And I gave it to him. I gave him some of this, here, use that. And he put that in. And that's the only thing that ever went into the original Sensi Soccer. The only thing I worked on was Sensible World of Soccer, which I did all the crowds, and I did some of the menu graphics and that, and some of the other bits and pieces that appeared, like the crowds and that. But yeah, so yeah.
So now we're on Cannon Fodder. So what was that process like? Because I know John was quite hands-on with the level design and the whole kind of structure of the difficulty and everything. So did that really affect your role in terms of doing art, or?
Surprisingly not. I think one of the difficult things to kind of get through when you're that age is criticism. A lot of people are so precious about what they do. And I've always been able to take on constructive criticism, because I've always been able to see that there is a bigger picture at play, and that is the project. you know, and the end game is we want to make a really good game. And the only way you can do that is to, you know, any egos you've got to keep out there and say, right, we're focusing on this game. Now, sometimes I might do something and I might think it's the bee's knees, and then it'll go, and someone say, well, actually, it's not that great. You think, why not? And they go, well, because I think, oh, okay, I get what you mean. So, I mean, for John, it was quite difficult for him initially because he was the only artist in the company. So all of a sudden, he's got this other guy coming in who's going to be basically doing all the graphics that he would have normally done. So for him, I think it was a bit difficult initially, but he never showed that. I mean, we got on really well, and we still do today. But so for me, I mean, I would just do stuff, and then he'd say, "Yeah, that's cool," or "That's not, you know, that's not really what I was had in my head," and we would just kind of, you know, work together and get things done. When it came to level design, we all had a go. I mean, I think John and Chris done the majority of level designs, but Jules did some, I did some. And then when we had loads of levels, I'm sure we had quite a few that didn't go in. I'm sure there's some discs somewhere with a few levels that didn't make it in. And what we did is we had like all the levels created, and John would go through, and he'd have a piece of paper, and he would rate them in difficulty level. So while you go through and play them, so well, that one's really easy, that one's not so easy. And often and not, the levels that might have ended up sort of later on were the ones that might have been developed earlier because they were too difficult. So we'd shove them towards like the back of the list and say, right, they're the harder levels, and we would rank them in like difficulty level order. And then what we would do is we'd go through, and he would say, right, well, in level 3, we're going to introduce, you know, bazookas, or you know, in level 10, we'll have a tank, and then you can then get used to using the tank, and then when you get to level 12, you'll need to use it properly, because you by that time you should have known how to drive it and use the firing of it. So the curve of Cannon Fodder was literally like that. His learning curve was pretty linear, you know. We got it wrong on a few of the later ones, I think, because I think some of the later levels were really, really difficult. And I think that having played a few of those, you know, in recent times, I think, do you know what, we should have like, you know, maybe eased off a bit on the difficulty level. But having said that, I mean, I've always had good feedback from people when they talk about it. So maybe the challenge was a good thing on those later levels, you know. It's a hard one to kind of say, really, because if you make a game too easy, then it's like, well, there's no fun in that. But again, if you make it too difficult, you lose people to think, well, I can't be bothered to play it anymore. But I think for the most part, we got it right on that one.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
But you do the the screen with the helicopter.
Oh yes, yeah.
So I mean, how is that kind of made in layman's terms?
Right, well, that's quite an interesting one, because being a total Amiga fan at the time, and Jules wasn't into the Amiga at all. His background, he used to work for I think it was Rare, and I think were they called Rare? I think Rare.
Ultimate.
They were I think were they Rare? They became Rare, didn't they? I think. But he'd worked on the Nintendo 8-bit, so he'd worked on the Famicom, the NES. So he'd done I think he'd done a couple of games on that. So he'd come from that kind of background. And this was his first Amiga project, as far as I know. And he'd used the ST before. So I think he'd used the ST previously. And so for him, he was learning hard. And I think what he achieved on that game was like, for a first project on the Amiga, was like, wow, you know, because he just hammered that hardware, you know. He pushed it to what he could do. And I was amazed he'd call me into the office, I've put this running. And you go, that's amazing, you know. So when it comes to doing this parallax section, I said to him, I've got a really good idea. I said, why don't we have it? Because I'm a big fan of like arcades. And at the time, you had all the big playfields spinning, like the Neo Geo stuff, and all the vertical scrollers, and you had all the parallax going past. And I loved all that stuff. And when the Amiga I knew the Amiga's got a dual playfield mode where you could have two 8-color layers, you know, overlapped. I said, I've got a really good idea. If I draw you like, you know, like a couple of layers where they overlap, we can do one like that, then that one overlaps there, and then another third layer can overlap there, and it will just basically build up. And because you're splitting it with the copper, you can layer it and have like as many layers as you like, really. And he said, all right, I'll give that a go. So I knocked up the jungle stuff, did like some roughs, and he got it working. It's like, yeah. And then we thought we'll have the helicopter going across, and which was a hardware sprite. So we did that. But originally, the helicopter was going to come along, and then it was going to land. And then I think we was talking about having like the guys getting out. But we never did that. In the end, we just went straight across. I don't know. I think this might have been memory. Perhaps we had memory problems, or we didn't have enough memory for it all, or we couldn't be bothered. I don't know. But originally, it was going to fly along like choplifter and come along and then land, and the guys would jump out, and then that would be the mission start. But at the moment, it just obviously just goes straight across, and then you fades out, and then you're into the level. So yeah, but I'm really that was something I was really pleased with that. But see, that's the thing with Sensible. When you work as a team, you're not saying, you know, I mean, he could have turned and said, oh no, I can't be. That's a lot of work for me, because it was a lot of work for him to do that. But it's like, yeah, I'll give it a go, you know. And we was all like that, you know. It's like someone suggested an idea, I say, well, I'll try that out. And I think that's why, as a team, we were that particular moment in time. In those sort of early to mid 90s, I think Sensible, that was the team, the golden team, you know, before we got big and they had loads and loads of people working there on other projects. You know, I think for me that was the golden time of Sensible Software.
And there's a bit of controversy around around Cannon Fodder, wasn't there, as well, in the press and what have you, with the poppies.
Yeah, that was the poppy. I mean, I do say I think that might have been my fault, because I'd drawn when they said we're going to have a poppy, I thought that's a cool idea, and I'd drawn the actual British Legion's poppy that you put on your lapel or your shirt or whatever, and I just put it on my desk and I taped it to the monitor. I'm like, tape it there on the monitor, and I just let it there, and I'm drawing it, and went in the game. Didn't think anything else of it, and then of course somebody thought, oh, that's not good, because you're basically, you're glorifying war. That's a bit disrespectful, which it wasn't really, because when anyone had played the game, you're actually saying, well, actually, war is really bad. It's not fun. And when you play it, you think, well, actually, it's quite sad to see all your little conscripts and they're all dying. They totally got the wrong end of the stick, and so effectively, to cut the long story short, we had to change the poppy to a real poppy. And I ran out the studio. Well, I didn't run. I walked. But it sounds better if I say I ran out with that sense of urgency. But I walked out the office with a sense of urgency. Thought, right, I'll get some poppies. And thankfully, it was that season. So obviously, that time of the year. And I went down. I think where we was based in Saffron Walden, I think there's a few growing out the side of a wall further down. And I picked a couple of them, brought them back, taped it to the monitor, sellotaped to the monitor, drew a new one, which is the one that ended up going in the game, and that was it, But the thing is, the publicity probably did us really, 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 really good, because it got our game noticed for people who might not have known about it, So after all that controversy with the Royal British Legion, it all worked out good in the end, But it just shows you how the press can distort the facts, and people don't look into things, will go, well, that's terrible. But when you look a bit deeper, you think, well, actually, that's not true. That's not what these guys are saying. They're not glorifying war in any way, shape, or form. They're not being disrespectful.
No, I mean, I'm sure they'd not played it,
No. I mean, don't forget, that's a time when video games were still, and computer games were still kind of, teenagers sort of were playing it, and young, kids and that. It wasn't, I don't think it was an adult pastime for a lot of people. It was still fairly new. I mean, there were adults playing it. I mean, we played games, but I think that generation, certainly an older generation, they didn't have a clue what it was all about. I think they were still, getting used to colour television. So,
Yeah, I think that, like you said, there's that kind of feeling of loss when you lose your little men, and I think that them having names, because obviously all you guys had your names in there as little soldiers, and I think that made quite a big difference to that feeling of, oh, I've lost one of my, especially if you've kind of had them and ranked them up for several levels.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting story about how that happened, because I remember when Jules first put the sprites in, my first version of the little soldiers I did, and I mean, only 3 frames of animation. They literally do like that. That's all they do, because they're so small, and we didn't have the memory for a lot more, because we had so many. I mean, if you look at the sprite file for Cannon Fodder, it's quite big. There's loads of sprites in there. and we put them in, and then I think John and Chris were talking about having like names, putting names in, and we originally was going to have two names. You can have like a surname as well as your first name, forename. But we realised that the memory would have been so crazy to have all those different names in. We just dropped it to the first name. But as soon as those names went in and they went on the panel, the side panel, it totally changed the dynamic of the game. And it was really weird because before that, they were just sprites, soldier sprites walking around, you know, no different to when you play sort of, you know, Commando in the arcade or Ikari Warriors or something. It's just a soldier. If he dies, you think, oh, all right, never mind. But when those names went in and you see the ranks building up through for several missions and then you die, you think, oh my God, you know, he's gone, you know. And it really made a difference. And it's weird because you think, look at those sprites, they're tiny, like 12 pixels high or something. Tiny little things, but because in your mind you associate a name, which is a physical person or a real person, to that little I suppose avatar, if you want to call it, then that also makes it a little bit more real, you know. And I think the imagination takes over, and you make a psychological link to a character which doesn't really exist, but because you're associating a name to it, you've got some kind of empathy towards it, and that's quite powerful. And I really, you know, I mean, we was talking about in the office at the time, thinking that's really weird. I feel quite sad that, you know, one of my little characters, he's been through like 4 missions, and he got hit by a grenade, and he's no longer with us. And you think, you know, I mean, God knows how many times I've been blown up in the game. So, you know, it's like, you know, it's crazy, but it's. I think it's what made the game, again, part of what made that game what it was.
And you know, obvious parallels with real war in that sense.
Totally. You know, and then it's the thing, it's both sides. I mean, I do often think, well, I don't often, but I've thought about what would have happened if we'd have somehow equaled it out and actually given the enemy soldiers or the opponent soldiers names as well, and seen those, because then you would have seen the other side, you know, because it would then give you some thought as to maybe some of the other characters, that they're just the same, but they're just fighting on a different side, you know. But ultimately, we are, you know, we're all the same, really, you know, at a grassroots level. So, yeah. But I think when I look at it, there's a lot of things that, you know, if we'd have done another version of the game later on, we could have addressed so much, you know. I know there was a version that John was working on at Codemasters, which they canned. I don't really know a lot about it, so you'd have to ask him about it. But I know there was a version there, and he said it was quite advanced, what they were working on. It had loads. It was quite well developed, and then they just cancelled it, which is a real shame, you know. But for me, I think Cannon Fodder should always be pixel art. I've always maintained it should be, because that again, that look and that sense of resolution, I think, is part of the fun of it, you know. And I think if there ever was an opportunity to develop a new version today, if I was involved, I would certainly go to that kind of look. It would be the same kind of look. Maybe the resolution would be up slightly, a little bit more detail in them. Because I mean, the original was like 320 by 256 or something, 240. But I think that, you know, keeping it as pixel art gives it that kind of like, it's Cannon Fodder, isn't it? You know, that's the look. So yeah, you know. But.
So there were quite a few cancelled projects over the years, like Mirror Signal Manslaughter and the Molotov Man. Were you involved in any of these?
Yeah, I did. I did the Mirror Signal Manslaughter was a funny one, because that never actually existed other than my screenshot that I created. Right. So we never actually got to the stage of actually writing any code for it. I think Chris Yates did. I can't even remember if he did a demo of it running or something. I can't even remember. All I remember is they said, "Oh, we've got this game where you can go around driving into people." And it's like, okay, could you do a screenshot? And then, you know, the premise being that if you do a good screenshot, we'll take that to a publisher with a design spec and a proposal, and hopefully somebody will sign it, and we'll get a publishing deal. So, and that screen was lost for many years. I had it on a floppy disk, and I thought it had gone. And when we did when the Sensible book came out, Jules Wills did the conversion for me, converted it back to the PC, and he managed to recover the data off of it, which was fantastic. And that screen is basically thanks to him, because that would have been lost if it wasn't for him. And he went through and actually took the disc apart, cleaned it, and then managed to restore the data from that. And that screen only lives today because of him. So I have to thank him again for that, because it was brilliant, because that work would have been lost. But I did that in 64 extra half bright mode as well on the Amiga, because I thought, well, if it's got to impress, I'll use that mode, which you can't really use for much else. It's only really for static screens. I mean, you could try and do a game in it, but it's a bit. I think it's got 6-bit planes or something, isn't it? So it's quite heavy on the old resources. That was one game, and then Molotov Man was for the Super Nintendo. And again, I was over the moon about working on that, because Chris had got the dev kit in the office, and he was playing around with the SNES. And then he was talking about doing like a Bomberman style game. And the idea is you just threw Molotov cocktails around, which is obviously like the bombs, but it wasn't quite the same as Bomberman. It was like that kind of idea, but it was like sidetracked a bit to something slightly different. And he said, "Do you want to not, come up with a character and some sprites and some tiles, and we'll try and get a publishing deal with it." So, and there is actually a demo of that, which I haven't got, but there is a demo there was a couple of demos of that created, so you could actually play it. And because I remember seeing it in the office, and he'd got like the explosions in, he'd got like all the. I think I did have it up on my website. I'm redoing my website at the moment, my Stoo Cambridge website at the moment. So I will put some of those images back up once I've got that live again. But that I managed to get some sprites done. I got the main character done, and I got some tile set graphics done for that. And that was looking pretty nice, because we, with the SNES, you had like 256 colors, in the tile set if you wanted, and it was really, really nice to work on. Just a shame the resolution was a bit naff, because I think SNES had a 256 wide pixel display or something, which was a bit naff really. I think if they'd have gone to 320, it would be much better, because converting between the SNES and the Mega Drive was a bit of a pain, because you lost your resolution a bit.
Right.
But yeah, they were the only ones that cancelled, and there was another one which was what was the other one? Have a Nice Day, which was for the PlayStation 1. That was another one that just didn't go anywhere. I worked on that one. That was involved. You was in an office chair, and you basically go around shooting everybody in the office while driving around in your chair. That was a 3D game, but that didn't really go. And again, there is demos of that available somewhere, but I don't know where they are. I think they must be an archive. So, which is a shame, because I think they'd be quite nice to see those again, even though they were quite early. It just for historical facts, just to see them again.
So what was that era like when you were kind of transitioning to 3D?
It was quite. It was a really weird time, because I think that we relate to the party with 3D. I'd done Sensible Golf, which wasn't really finished when it came out. It was, you could play it. It was a finished game, but it wasn't finished in terms of all the stuff that we should have put in it. We just sold it had to be finished, and that was it. And we got it out the door. But we were struggling to get a 3D system in the company. There was no 3D engine, and with the PlayStation, there was not. I think we was too late to get something out before the company suffered. And I never really got into 3D. I did some low poly 3D modeling and a few basic stuff, but I never really took to it. I just found it, I didn't really enjoy it. I just didn't enjoy doing 3D art. I prefer doing like proper illustrations and digital art and pixel art. I prefer doing that sort of stuff. But for me, I just think that if we'd have maybe invested some time in doing some 3D engine work before maybe it got too late, then maybe certain things might not have happened. Who knows? But to me, it was like the death of Sensible, really. I mean, I think they did. See, I left I left not long after Sensible Golf come out. I started my own company, and I think that when they released the 3D Sensi Soccer, which I believe wasn't very good, it was okay, but just wasn't the same sort of game. I think that's when it all kind of started to go a bit downhill, and it's a shame, and obviously there was Sex, Drugs and Rock and Roll, the game, which basically consumed all the resources of the company at the time. I mean, it really, really did. And that wasn't even 3D, that was 3D rendered, that wasn't using real-time 3D. But again, getting good 3D artists at that time, it was still a fairly new skill set. So, there's plenty of people doing it, but out of those people doing it, what percentage of those can do it commercially to a standard that is required for a video game? So there was a lot of problems, I believe. Yeah.
So were you happy with Sensible Golf in terms of the look and everything?
I was. I mean, it was modelled after some of the arcade golf games. Some of the sprites weren't actually finished when it came out. I mean, the overall the look I was pleased with the look. I'd like to, when you go into your first start and you've got that little hut at the side and you've got a little man, he's standing. I wanted that to be animated, so you'd see him walking on, but we just didn't have time to do that. And I wanted to do a few of those where you'd see him walking from along the side, and you just see little cut scenes. Didn't get that in. The sprites for when he's putting, they weren't finished, so they're actually unfinished sprites that went into that one. They're functional, but I look at them now and I'm thinking they're awful. Just awful to look at, because I'd never finished the look of them properly. But overall, I think it was okay. It just didn't have that polish, didn't have the polish that we needed. I mean, I'd like to have had like bunny rabbits jumping out of the bushes and, maybe a little squirrel poking his head through, some trees and just little things like that, maybe like a fish jumping out of the water, all those things you expect to see on like a console game, but we just didn't put them in. So unfortunately, although it's quite a good game if you've got a few people playing it, the single player game isn't as good as I think it could have been, but we did what we could in the time we had, and that's all we could do, I'd love to have gone back to it and done another version, but that would never have happened given that the sales weren't as good as our other games, so yeah.
So you touched on earlier that kind of roundabout Cannon Fodder era was the golden era of Sensible, but how did the team dynamic actually change as the company grew and there were more employees?
That's a good question. I mean, when I mentioned earlier that the best time was just sort of the early 90s, around when Cannon Fodder and Sensi Soccer and SWAS was being developed, Mega-lo-Mania, that was a brilliant, because there was only a small group of us. There's 5 of us in the office, and it was like a load of mates having a laugh, but professionally, so we actually got work done. But once we moved to Saffron Walden, and we ended up with having offices that had like a ground floor, first floor, and a second floor. And then they took the offices next door to house a rendering farm and artists to do all the 3D stuff for the Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll game. The place just changed. I remember a few times I'd go downstairs to the kitchen to make a coffee, and there'd be people I didn't know who they were. They were artists who they took on to do the 3D modeling. I didn't have a clue who they were, and they didn't have a clue who I was. And it was like weird, and that kind of changed. The dynamic of the place changed, and because of the scale of that project, it meant John Hare and Chris Yates weren't involved in a lot of the stuff that they would have been involved with the the 2D stuff that we was working on, the Amiga stuff, and again, it lost that dynamic, because I'd often if I was working on something, John would come in and he'd have a talk about things and he'd look at it and he might suggest something. And that wasn't so much in the later days. And I think that's another reason why Sensi Golf was never really, it never really got to the stage where it was classed as a polished, sensible game, because the whole dynamic of the place changed. And that was the time when I thought, this isn't going to last for much longer, because I kind of sensed that this wasn't happening, which is why I decided to leave, which was a tough decision, because, I could have stayed. But then I think, well, how long am I going to be staying for? Because if the company goes, what's going to happen to me? I best to try and do something now while I can. So, which is what I did.
So looking back on your time there, would you say, what would you say was your favourite project that you worked on?
I don't know, because I loved it all. I can't. I mean, Cannon Fodder, because it's been such a big hit, and I'm known for that game. That's the game that really defined the graphics that people know me from. But if I'm brutally honest, I enjoyed everything I did there. I mean, I literally did. I mean, we did a secret project, which isn't so secret now, for Sega, called World Championship Soccer 2. The Sega Mega Drive. And I think that's called the who was, I can't remember the credits, something the Cooks or something. It was class.
Oh, something chefs or something
Chefs, something
cooks.
chefs, yeah,
Yeah.
something chefs. It was called. And
John told me. I can't remember what it was. But...
you know, I can't remember what it's
Mm.
called. And I wish I'd had the game, because I know that the UK, I think the UK release of that game is worth a lot of money now in the blue
Yes.
case.
Yeah.
And I just wish I'd blagged a copy at the time, because, you know, I could have said to them, well, can someone from Sega send me a copy? Because I've got a Mega Drive. But I never did. And I kicked myself now, because,
Mm.
you know, not to sell it, just to say I've got it, you know. But I think every game I worked, everything I did there, I just loved, you know. The only things that I would say is I just wish we'd have, I wish I'd have, I mean, it sounds odd, but I wish I'd appreciated that time more than I did at the time, because I just took it like, that's what I'm doing and I'm enjoying it. It's only now I look back and I think, God, that really was a brilliant time. You know, it really was such a great experience. I mean, even when we did cover discs, which were often a pain to develop, you know, because they were often quite last minute. You know, they'd come in, you've got to do a cover disc for a magazine. You know, they were often sort of. I'd often curse about doing those, because I was usually busy doing graphics on you know, Cannon Fodder or whatever game was doing. But even now, I look back, I think, yeah, they were good to do, because they're, again, part of that sensible history, and that the part of what made us what we were. You know, we did loads of cover discs to get the demos out, but I mean, there was no point there where I didn't enjoy working. There was no, I mean, the highlight was all of it, really. If I'm honest, if that's a bit cliche, I don't know. You know, it was just a brilliant environment to work in. I'm appreciative of the fact that I got that job. You know, and it gave me the opportunity to be creative and show my skills off, without somebody saying, no, you can't do that, or you got to make it look like this. You know, because many artists who get on the industry, you'd have to conform to, you know, a certain style, or if you're doing conversion work, or you'd have to do something, you know, which somebody else would tell you what you needed to do. So a lot of the time, it was great to have that creative freedom. So yeah, it was all good. It was all good.
I think that kind of freedom is something that was more prevalent in that era as well, in general, early 90s, than it is now.
Yeah.
Which is a shame in a way.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
I'm just looking on my list of questions, and I actually skipped over World Championship soccer.
Okay, yeah.
Which, you know, as I said, I might bounce around a bit, but
can
you tell us anything about that? Because I know, obviously, you said you guys didn't put your name on it. No one even really knows it was developed by Sensible Software, because it was a sequel to what do they call it? It was World Cup Italia 90. Was it in?
No, I think there was a World Championship Soccer. I think they did come out, and because I never knew about the game. But I don't know if it was. I don't know what it was a sequel.
Didn't they rename it? That, like,
it might have been.
Maybe I'm thinking.
They might have done, actually.
I think it's the same game as Italia 90. I think
they might have renamed it to something else.
But yeah, it did come out originally as World Championship Soccer. Yeah. You're right, and that was top down.
Yeah.
Was it like it wasn't top down? Was it the one?
No, the one we did was side. It was like a side scrolling. So when you went, it, like the screen kind of went like that. Hang on, everyone's trying to like that. So it would all that kind of effect.
Right,
so remember that where it scrolls sideways. So the goal would be like there, and then when you scroll that way, it would go like that. You know, and then you'd have like the perspective of the pitch was something like that. So you'd have like all the players running, and then it would scroll up and down. But that was running the Sensi Soccer code. That was actually Sensi Soccer running behind that. All the gameplay code for Sensi Soccer was in that, because obviously the Mega Drive's a 68,000 processor. So Chris Yates ported that. And the only funny thing, and it's funny because I was talking to Neil at Retro Man Cave about this the other day, and because I was over there, we was doing the promoting the colouring book, and I said to him about it, and I said, like, the fact that we had, like, I had to use the sprites, the same number of sprite frames for the bigger sprites. Now the sprites in Sensi Soccer are like that size, and they're like 3 frames or something, or 5 frames. So like, and then it would ping back. But the sprites in World Championship Soccer 2 are like that big, and they're much more. They're like FIFA sprites. They're big, actually bigger than the FIFA sprites.
Yeah.
So imagine you've got to do an animation. It's like it looks a bit naff. But there was no memory. It was like, that's what you got to do, and that keeps it in with the code, because he wouldn't have had to change loads of code. So I was a fan of I asked him the TV show Lovejoy. So, so all the players in the World Championship Soccer 2 are modelled after Ian McShane's Lovejoy. So if you boot that game up now and look and you think, oh yeah, it's Lovejoy. So you've got like basically you've got a team of Lovejoys playing against a team of Lovejoys.
Oh my God.
They've all got the dark hair and the mullet.
Wow.
And that's what I did at the time, because I thought, wow, that'll look all right. That'll look all right, So yeah. So if you load that game up and look, you'll think, I see what Stoo means now. And then you get like a picture from like Lovejoy, the 90s TV show, you'll see it. Because they actually filmed it round Stratford Walden where we were based.
Oh, right.
As well. All around that area they filmed it.
Mm.
So yeah. But again, it was a Mega Drive, so it was a brilliant title to work on. I really enjoyed working on it, and I did all the menu graphics. There was like flags that circled round, and all the menus, and I liked all the things that came in when you scored a goal. We'd have the great big arcade style lettering, which I did. Loved all that stuff. To me, working on the Mega Drive was like working on an arcade machine. The way it felt. It had the same hardware effectively as some of the arcade machines. It's the same kind of ideas, and I really enjoyed it. But I just wish it was a shame. It was just a shame that people didn't realise that was us that created that game. Because we didn't get no credit for it. And it's only now that it's coming out that was our project. We did that. And I don't know why they kept it a secret. I don't understand what the reason. I don't know. It was must do contractual reasons. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if John knows why it was kept a secret while we worked on it.
So do you know if it was the decision from Sensi's side or from Sega's side?
I don't know. I think I would suggest. Well, I don't know. It would seem to me that it would have been a Sega decision, but I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know whether we were doing a dodgy and developing it without, there was a contractual reason. I honestly don't know. I really don't know what the reason was. All I know is it was a secret project, and Chris said to me like, "Oh, we got this project. But this is like a secret project, and it's with Sega, and that's it." So for me, I didn't really care. I couldn't care less because I just did love doing the work. I love doing the graphics, love doing the animation. I loved my arcade games, and I loved the Mega Drive. So for me, it was like, I don't really care. I'm just happy to do it. So it was good. It's a good project. I enjoyed it. I don't know if the game plays. I don't think it plays as well as Sensi Soccer because the angle's been changed and the perspective's changed, so it's not quite the same kind of dynamic. But I think the basic gameplay is the same in terms of the functionality of the controls. Now are pretty much the same. If I recall, I haven't played it for a while, so.
I think that's most of my questions. Unless you've got any interesting stories that you think people would find interesting that you want to mention. But...
I've got quite a few actually, but I don't know if I can put them on air.
Right.
There's quite a few. I mean, I'm putting together like a sort of a biography at the moment. I've been working on it for a couple of years on and off, just putting little bits in, which I'm going to do as part of an art project as well. So I've got graphics and stuff in there. But one of the things I wrote about was a time when this is in the Saffron Walden offices, and I was sitting at my desk, and I shared an office with Chris Chapman, who wrote Sensi Soccer and Sensi World of Soccer and Mega-lo-Mania. And he was over the other side near the window, and I was at the other side of the office, and I had a window that faced the back of the building. And above us directly was where John and Chris's sort of office was, which we called Suitland because that was where all the business happened. So we called it Suitland. And one day we heard this bang outside downstairs. I thought, what the hell's that noise? So I'm sitting there working, and like imagine the window's like there, like sort of there where that that corner is there. I think, oh, what's that noise? It's a massive bang. So I opened the window and I looked out, and there's like a monitor on the floor smashed to bits. So I didn't put my head out, but I'm like, it turns out like Chris hates, he had some old hardware, and he thought I'll just throw it out the window. And I'm thinking, if I'd have put my head out, it's like bang. But there was like all sorts flying down, it's like all bits and pieces, like just rubbish that he, rather than just sending it over the junk, just threw them down there. And then I think obviously they went to the junkyard once we'd been cleared up, But I mean, there's other tales. I mean, we used to have some radio control cars in the old offices, and we had like this, I think Chris went out and bought some radio control cars, and there was like 4 of them. And this is before we moved to Saffron Walden. So this is in the offices in March in Cambridgeshire. And they had this bank. I mean, they had this bank of like rechargeable batteries. It was like this, just the strips of these rechargeable power banks, which we kept recharging the batteries in for these radio controlled cars. And we just raced them around the car park, and where the offices was based, it was the end of a railway siding. So you had like the station, and then you'd have like a siding next adjacent to the station. It was end. And there was like this ramp, which must have been used years ago for loading, the freight on and off the trains. So we would launch these cars off the ramp and onto the track. And this line wasn't used, this siding. It was like all rusty, it wasn't used. We would launch it off. And it's like, this was like literally a few months after I'd started. So for me, I'm like, this is work. This is awesome. This is fantastic. And I remember telling my parents, I'd like phone up and say, oh, what are you doing today? Oh, yeah, I've had some radio controlled cars. And I'm like, my dad said, well, aren't you supposed to be working? I said, well, they're all doing it and we're all doing it. So I guess that's part of work.
Team building.
Yeah. But I mean, there's loads of stories, But it was just a great experience, because the thing is, I laugh and jest about it all, but we all knew what we had to do. So although we might have gone out and played some control cars, sometimes you might go down the pub for lunch, but you knew that, you still had work to do. So when you got back, you just get on with what you're doing, and the people who didn't do that, and, maybe had a few too many pints, and then they end up taking the rest of the afternoon off. It's like, well, it's all right, but as long as you get your work done, it doesn't matter. But there's a few people who came and went who didn't share that kind of work ethic. So, but we always knew that we had to get stuff done. So, it didn't matter. And I think that's part and parcel of working there, is that we all had the same kind of ideas of what it is to get the projects done. So as I said, if you got in at, say, I don't know, 11:30 in the morning, and then you went home at midnight, you've put a good day in. But if you came in 11:30 and decided, actually it's 4:00, I'm going to go home, it's like, well, hang on a minute, if you've got no reason why, that's half a day, So yeah, I think the main thing is, a lot of people, it was like managing yourself a lot of the time. If you had that kind of self-management skills, then you got on really well at Sensible. It was a good place. But I mean, there's loads of stories I could tell. Loads of stories. There's quite a few. I'm sure John's probably got a few as well.
Yes,
he's probably told us, hasn't he?
He has, yeah. Yeah, he has. Yeah. Well, you'll have to save the rest for your biography.
Yes.
I look forward to that.
Yes, yeah. I don't know when it'll be finished, but I'm juggling quite a lot of things at the moment, so I'm trying to, write a few words when I can. But I want to try and make it, rather than just a book of words with some illustrations and some reference photos and that. So it's actually quite a good read, when it's finished. Because I like to, when you see things, it's nice to see some things from the time, maybe some stuff that people haven't seen before. So that's pretty much a back burner project at the moment. But yeah, so one day it'll be finished.
Yeah, that's it. So for people watching who don't know, tell them what else you got going on. So you got a design droid.
Yes, I've got the design droid, which is well, I don't know if you can see the canvas. I've got one here actually. This is, I did some of these things like this. So because I worked on the Jaguar version of Sensi Soccer. So when I did the Jaguar version, I recolored. I did all the sprites because the original sprites were limited because of the Amiga's palette. You could only have 16 colors, and without them 16 colors, we had to remap, them for different team colors. So when we come to do the Jaguar version, I recolored them all, so you had like more shades, so they're much more smoother. So I took those, and then I redrew them again with even more colors. And when I created the canvas, and I've redone the pitch, and I've made a lot, there's lots of crowds and stuff. So I've sold that on my site, as well as as a Canon Fodder one I've got on there. If people want to go to the designdroid.co.uk, they can see that. And I often have like sales and offers on, so every so many weeks or months, I might put a sale up there. There's one on at the moment. So I've been doing that, and that's really just a thing that I set up just so to give me a focal point to create new art. because being a commercial artist, you're always busy working on other people's projects or projects that you're working with people on. But personal stuff, you never get a time to do. It's like, but if I know I've got somewhere to do it for, like, you know, like a website I'm feeding with content, then I think, okay, I can put that on the shop, or I can do that. And it just gives me that little incentive to actually get off my backside and draw something, you know, because I'm quite, I'm not, it's just sound odd, but I don't sit and spend loads of time drawing, you know. I'm fairly capable. I'm not, you know, it's not like I can't draw anything, but I tend to be so busy doing stuff for other projects. I just don't get the time to sit and just be leisurely draw, you know, and I'd love to have that time. So that's what the design joy is all about. And I've got, like, you know, I've got like little magnets and things. I don't think it can be seen. You get one of those when you order one, little fridge magnet with it on. But the other thing I'll be doing is I'll be doing this with Neil and the team at RMC, which was an awesome project to work on. It was absolutely amazing. And we've got all, like, you know, you've got all these 32 illustrations in there, various machines. There's the old Game Boy there, and what else we got in here? There's loads of them in there. So there's all the backers, and got the Spectrum in there. You know, it's just like, and that was fantastic to draw. I absolutely love that. So that's just finished that one, and we are talking possibly about doing a second volume at some point. So that would be nice, because there's so many machines out there. I mean, when I was researching for that book, you look around and you see, like, you know, there are so many variations of machines, or people did rip-offs of the machines, or there's machines that you knew that existed but you didn't have a lot of photos of. So I learned a lot doing that book, you know, and the only thing that's quite funny is when you've drawn one keyboard, you realise that drawing another one is not much fun. But when you've got, like, a book with, like, you know, 20 computers in it and they've all got keyboards, you think, oh, I've got to draw another keyboard now. So it's like, you know, but yeah, so that's another thing I'll be doing. Also, I haven't got it to hand because it's actually in the house, but I've been writing for Amiga Addicts magazine. So if people want to subscribe to that, they'll see a regular column in there, which I've been doing. And also, I was talking to, I've got my good mate Chris at Fusion Retro Books. I've been looking to do, where's that gone? I've got Zap Amiga. I'm looking to start writing for that. I was supposed to be writing for it from the start, but I've kind of forgot, and he kind of forgot, and so I'll be looking to contribute to that soon as well. What else is there? Don't know what else there is really. I mean, just basically, I'm trying to be more on Twitter than I used to be. I took a break from that just before Christmas, and I took a break for it and just forgot to come back. So my social media feeds were, like, quite intense the last few weeks, and I've kind of settled down a little bit now because I've kind of replied to as many people as I can. But I logged out, and I just found that I had so much time to do stuff because I wasn't continually because I was like a lot of people. You sit there and you're like checking your phone every 5 minutes, and I stopped it. I've actually taught myself not to do it now, so I don't actually check my phone at all. I've kind of gone from one end of the scale to the other end of the scale. I'm trying to just do all my social media in the mornings now. So if anybody messages me or tags me, I tend to do all that stuff first thing in the morning. And again, for email, anyone emails me, I tend to do that in the morning and possibly late at night if I'm chilling out. So if anyone does that and they don't get a reply from me, just give me a bit of time and I'll get back to. I tend to reply to everybody. What else have I got? I'll tell you what else I do, which is really cool. I'll see if I can show you. Hang on, let me get it. And now, when I was doing the book with the Retro Tea Breaks book with Neil at RMC, I think it was the Pixel Portraits, which I've been really enjoying. I did so many of them. I think for the book we did like 70.
Yeah, it did one of me. I got it next door. Yeah.
It's and that was pretty cool. So obviously on my site now, you can
Mm.
You can get your own pixel portrait on a canvas if you want. And I'm working on different backgrounds now, so you can have like, you know, different circuitry for like Commodore 64, Amiga. I'm going to do an ST1, ZX Spectrum, do that. So yeah, and they're on there now, or you can just buy a digital one. So if you want me to do a digital one, they're on there. But I'm looking to add more products and stuff to it. You know, I know there's been a lot of talk. I've had quite a few people message me about doing mouse mats. But I'm just looking into that, because with mouse mats you've got to order in bulk to get them at a reasonable price. And the problem is if I buy them in, like, you know, lots of 10, the price that I charge people would just too much, and I don't really want to do that. So I'm just looking at different options at the moment for other products. But for the most part, I'm just selling the canvases and the digital stuff. So yeah, that's me. But yeah, but it's all good fun. I'm trying to keep busy, you know, trying to keep busy, and that is exactly what I am. I'm usually really, really busy. So, but it's all good fun. All good fun.
Cool. Well, yeah, I'll link all that stuff for everybody
Excellent.
down there. Twitter and obviously your website. I've got a Canon Fodder canvas up there, which I thoroughly recommend if anyone wants them. And they're great gifts, those, you know, the little portraits. Brilliant.
No, thank you very much, mate. It's great, and I one of the things I like, and I know people say, oh, well, you're just selling your art where you're making, but one of the things I really, really like is when people put them up on social media, and you see it on someone's wall, or, you know, because the thing is, for me, and it sounds really stupid, I know, but I get a little bit of a buzz out of people liking my work. You know, the fact they've actually parted with money for something I've created means a lot to me, you know, because it's just, you know, I've created something and people feel like they like it so much they want to buy it, and I love it. And I love the fact that people put them on their walls. I mean, there was a guy talking to a while ago, and he said, it just looks so great in my little gaming den, my little gaming cave, you know. He said it completes he bought two. He bought a Sensi Soccer one, and he bought a Canon Fodder one, and he put them on his wall. He said they just look amazing in there. And I said, I really appreciate that, thank you. But the other thing with the Sensi Soccer ones, I'm doing I'm changing them slightly in the next few months. But with the Sensi Soccer ones, you can is that one? You can. This is like one of the longer ones. I don't know if you can. The light might be knackering that. But what I've done, these are customized, so you can choose your own team colors. So rather than, because I know that football's, you know, people who are really into their football, if I've got a canvas on there and it's got two teams they really don't like, they're not going to buy the canvas. You know, it's like, you know, it's like Tottenham versus Arsenal or something, or Tottenham versus like Millwall or whatever. They go, well, I don't really like them colours. I don't want that on my wall, you know. But if I could offer somebody, like, you know, their own team colours on there, it's like, okay. So, I mean, all mine are set as West Ham, obviously, because you know, that's where I come from. So when you buy it, you don't get West Ham unless you want West Ham. So yeah, if you go on there, you can get you can choose all the colours, and you know, they look really good actually. I'm really, really pleased with the way the quality of the print has come out. It took me a while to source a good supplier who can manufacture them to the standard I want, you know. So they're really good. But yeah, but thanks for having me on. Really enjoyed having a chat, and it's a shame it took us so long, which is mostly down to me, I know. But
it takes me a while to get around to these things as well. So
yeah. So
all good.
Thanks for having me on. It's great.
Yeah, really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. And
excellent.
And yeah,
thank you.
Have a good day.
Cheers, mate. See you later.
Cheers.
Bye. Thank you.